So something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is it's been said that, like you are one decision away from a completely different life. And it's wild to me how actually true that is. And I see that what it is that stops a person from actually doing that is comfort and familiarity, right? The known. And I'm going to look at specifically repetition compulsion, right? Which is, in other words, autopilot, just choosing to wake up and do the same fucking thing over and over again. That same thing is usually based around childhood conditioning, specifically, childhood trauma and everything. Um, and looking at that, of course, like a prime example is unhealthy, toxic relationships, right? If you learned dysfunctionality in relationships that were modeled for you from your caretakers, parents, whoever they were, right, you're likely to seek that out, right? That is comfortable and familiar to you. And looking specifically at the word familiar, familial, right? Family. Everything that we do in life is usually based around what we learned in childhood, right? The patterns that we repeat, the way that we choose to do things, what we choose to do, right? And there are two ways that you could approach this. You can choose to do something completely different from what it is that you're comfortable and familiar with. And you can also choose to do things that you've done previously differently, right? Maybe you've done relationships in an unhealthy and dysfunctional way. You can choose to do them in a healthy and functional way. What is it that stops a person from doing that? Well, of course, again, comfort and familiarity. I've got loads of experience in this. I mean, everyone does, I think. I think it's safe to say that we all live based on what it is that we're familiar with, the known. And so this what I'm talking about here is all about stepping into the unknown, not continuing to paint with the same burnt out fucking frizzy ass brush with dried up monotone gray on it, right? You can choose to paint with the wind. You can choose to paint with neon blue. You can choose to paint with, I don't know, any colors, right? But really learning to step outside of the comfort and the familiarity, for instance. Like, for example, if I were to choose to step outside here and say, for instance, I'm uncomfortable with filming in a place where, say, if it were the case, I know it's not the case, but if I were uncomfortable with filming around a bunch of people, and there's not a bunch of people here, so it doesn't apply here, but just using an example, what stops me from doing that is the tension that I would be stepping into, right? That's different. Maybe I'm concerned about what they're thinking about me. Maybe I'm tuning to them energetically, right? And I'm worried about that. And that, in and of itself, is what stops me from moving forward with that, which is what would be potentially the same thing that stops a person from looking at themselves or forming healthier relationships, maybe because they're attracted to the chaos and the drama and the gossip and the dysfunctional roller coasters of unhealthy relationships, right? And not only that, but like, being in the light and then choosing to step into, it's not really that dark, but some shade, right? Maybe we're afraid of looking at ourselves because we're afraid of the difference that will take place in our lives, right? And there are things to look at in the shadows, shadow work. I believe that's Jungian, right? Carl Jung. Just choosing to do things differently. And that's just the reality of it, right? Throughout my entire life, I've done things that I didn't want to. I take full responsibility for it. But I was doing it because I was looking for love's ugly cousin, which is validation and approval, right? Because I thought that I needed frame. When I say frame, I mean sense of self, identity, validation, and approval from other people. So I did things that I didn't want to do to get the validation and approval from other people until I learned that, oh, it's actually not healthy to seek validation and approval externally in adulthood, right? And so that in and of itself, well, let me say this first. All of that stuff is intrinsic, meaning that it originates from within us, and it is inherent within us, and that's just the way that it is, right? That in and of itself is an example of doing things differently. Gotta make sure my mic is still on. My mic's on. The last video that I did, pretty much the same exact video, the audio cut out, and I was like, oh, great. And that's another thing too. Doing things as an end in itself, meaning doing things because you enjoy it versus doing things to get things. Throughout my entire life, I've been doing things to get things. I've been doing things that I don't want to get validation and approval, to get fame from other people, right? Meanwhile, not realizing that my frame, my frame, it comes from Michaels, it comes from Blick Arts and Crafts. I love it. Not realizing that my worth is intrinsic and it's not attached to anything that I do. And so, also, that's another thing, because yesterday, I believe yesterday's video was all about how, you know, we do things because we're looking for the validation and approval, right? But when you do things because you enjoy them, you're doing it because you enjoy it, and you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff, right? So maybe, you know, being one decision away from a completely different life is doing things because you enjoy them rather than doing things to get things, right? Imagine how different that would be. Maybe you're losing a relationship. Cool. That relationship probably sucked anyway. Is it your parents? Cool. Maybe they'll come back around, right? I've known people personally in my own life, no names, that have done things that they didn't want to do because of validation and approval, right? And it's fascinating because, like, when you stop doing that, it's natural that you become more attractive. You become more magnetic. Like, imagine living your entire life doing things that you don't want to do. I mean, I'll personally pass on that. Also considering that I've had around 3 decades of experience with that, you know, it's just so fascinating. I am one decision away from an entirely different life. What is stopping me? What's stopping me would be the comfort and the familiarity of everything, of the repetition compulsion, the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, everything. That in and of itself is a specific identity that keeps me locked into a very specific way of living, which has me avoidant towards things that are not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just fucking different. It's the difference between turquoise and burnt orange. You know? Neither are bad, but both of them will give you two totally different experiences of life. It's not a matter of good or bad or right or wrong. It's just a matter of what it is that you want. Are you doing what it is that you want? Are you really doing what it is that you want? But are you really doing what it is that you want? Are you sure? I'm just kidding. No, but really, I'm also not kidding at the same time, because my life had been layered, and still somewhat is, in, like, all of these bullshit layers of, kind of like peeling back the one layer. Are you doing what it is that you want? Are you really doing what it is that you want? Are you sure you're doing what it is that you want? Listen, years and years of experience with codependency will really fuck you up. Years and years of experience with doing things that you don't want to do because you feel like you have to, and you just don't allow yourself to do what it is that you want to, will really fuck you up. It will. Conditioning yourself to be okay with doing things that you don't want to do will lead to a life of fucked upness. And it will lead you to just have dysfunction in everything. Who the fuck wants to do things that they don't want to do for their entire life? I sure don't, says Chris. I don't. I don't. So it's comfort and familiarity that keeps people trapped inside of the known. It is this idea that there's going to be something inside of the unknown that we are scared of, that we don't want, right? But the funny thing about that is that the known, or the unknown, is the unknown. You don't know what's in it. You really can't, like, be like, oh, well, I think that's in it. Well, probably not, because it's unknown. You don't know what's there, right? And if anything, the known is rather, I mean, the unknown is rather magical, because it's just a space of potentiality. That's all that it is. That's all that it is. I'm so fascinated by this. Literally, one decision away from a completely different life. The gravity of that. Maybe it's an email that I have to write. Maybe it's um, a job that I have to start. Oh, by the way, maybe it's the meaning that I associate with something that prevents me from making the choice. Meaning has so much to do here. If you ascribe negative meaning to something, the likelihood that you're going to fucking do it is very low. Let's look at that. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Yeah, the likelihood that you're going to do something after you've ascribed negative meaning to it. Oh, you want to avoid that at all costs. Who the fuck is going to do that? Or, in other words, who is going to spend 10 days of motherfucking procrastination before they actually decide to start thinking about doing it? In other words, they probably end up not doing it, right? Yeah. Meaning is one of the most important things to look at here because we ascribe and attach meaning to things. We attach meaning to people, to fucking everything, right? Oh, that person's bad. Well, no, they're not. They're not good or bad or right or wrong. They're just a person. You've just learned to dislike them. You've learned to dislike brushing your teeth. You've learned to dislike doing this, that, and the other because of the meaning that you've attached to it. And that is why you don't do things that could benefit your life and change your life drastically and lead to a drastically happier life. You're just choosing to stay inside of the comfort and the familiarity of the known and everything that you've known, even though you don't like it. And it's fascinating how much better your life could be if you actually choose to just, do the different thing. Do the different thing. Wow, there's a lot of sun in my eyes now. That visor was really but that's what it's all about. And maybe it has a lot to do with, I'll go back to this darker area over here. I'll go back to the darkness. Come to the dark side. Maybe it has to do with looking at yourself. You know how much different your life can be if you look at yourself? Look at yourself in the mirror. Ooh, damn. Like, and maybe you're like, right? I don't know. Like, it's a matter of doing the different